please welcome Shooter Jennings and Duff Mckagan. Man, we are so happy you guys are here. First of all, it's great to have you back.
Great to be here.
Great to have you back. I know that both of you have been here previously.
Amazing introduction.
Oh, well, you know, wrote it myself.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Cool.
So, how did you guys first meet? When did you first meet?
A long time. I mean, 2001. I think.
Yeah.
I think many years ago.
Yeah, just hanging around, playing? What was the circumstance?
Shooter's band, Stargun. So Shooter,
Yeah.
as far as I knew, like, here's how I tell the story. You just really kind of come out from Tennessee.
Nashville, yeah.
And he had a rock band, and this is at a time there wasn't a lot of rock and roll bands going down. And there was a few bands out there kind of saving rock and roll, if you're me, if you're talking to me.
Yeah.
And my band, Loaded, was playing like punk rock and roll, and Stargun, his band he came out here with, played a show with us, and I saw him play at some like house party, and I was down here writing music and doing something, and I could tell just by this kid, I didn't know the Waylon any connection.
Yeah.
He was just a kid who I saw with the look in his eyes. His band playing rock and roll. He was like a truth teller. And there's you know, you recognize those few out there that have the real thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew that about Shooter from how old were you? 22?
22.
Yeah.
22.
I was like 25.
Yeah.
That's right. Or something like that. Close enough.
And if I'm not mistaken, Guns N' Roses was, you know, if not, you know, a reason certainly in the back of your mind in terms of what got you to Los Angeles.
100%. I mean, just because I was an MTV kid, and I didn't like Nashville. I mean, you know, it was at the time it was like there was a couple cool kind of rock bands that were stirring around, like Screaming Cheetah Wheelies and like Jason and the
God
Scorchers.
bless Mike Ferris.
You know, that were like.
God bless that guy.
And that was cool, but you know, I was not. That wasn't where I wanted to be. To me, if you were gonna play real music, you had to go to L.A. or New York, and it was like all my favorite bands were from L.A. and certainly Guns N' Roses. I studied those records, especially the Use Your Illusion records. I thought they were brilliant. It was a brilliant masterpiece. And then the first two records I bought on CD, really.
Right.
So it was like you know, L.A. I remember the first time I saw the Welcome to the Jungle video and Axl getting off the bus, and I'm like, that's where I want to be. You know?
That looks like the
seems
life
fun.
for me. Yeah, yeah.
You know.
So I know that you guys had worked on the tracks for Tenderness for about a year or so. But what was the impetus? What got you working together?
Well, of course, we've known each other for all this time, and
yeah.
I've seen Shooter here and there, and rooted for his career, and followed his records. Black Ribbons is one that spoke to me especially, and I had been writing these songs on this road, this tour we did, this massive road trip around the world 4 times. And as a columnist, as you mentioned earlier, I really, being a columnist for as long as I was, I learned to become an observationalist because I always had to write next week's column.
Yeah.
And at the same time, since I got sober in '94, I've just become this like avid history reader. Like I'm an armchair historian, I call myself. And I'll read like about huge swaths of history from 3 or 4 different vantage points. And we are doing this road trip at inarguably one of the most interesting times in our history, right? That's going on right now. And no comment either way. I won't, because I just read too much, and I see how fast things, you know, change and same cycles go through, and it's not
interesting is a good way to describe it.
It's not worth my really breath to like, because it's going to pass before we know it. And but you know, we were in America. We were rehearsing for the tour, and like everybody else, watching like the big 3 cable news stations, and I was getting super anxious and you know, looking at Twitter and getting super anxious. We went out. We played an American tour, then we went to, I think, South America, and suddenly I didn't have the 3 news stations, and I decided not to look at Twitter. And my wife and I, when we travel, we go on to, our kids are grown now, right? And we do all this nerdy tourist stuff. We love it. We do all this stuff, and I do it on my own even when she's not out there because she's kind of trained me to do this stuff. And Tadao and I, we go and see stuff. And what you do when you do that, because you're going and seeing stuff, you talk to people. And talk to people across America. We went to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's place. We went to Little Bighorn, Custer's Lab. Went to World War I Museum, countless places. And you talk to people. And if you're not watching the news and you're not looking at Twitter, I really recognize as this observationalist that this divide they're talking about and all this other, like naming people elites or lefties and all this crap, it's not there. I just didn't see it there. And the America that I know is like the one after 9/11. Like when that happened to us all, we all came together and we had each other's backs, neighborhood by neighborhood, house to house. And the hurricane in Houston, just like a year and a half ago.
Sure.
Nobody asked who the fuck you voted for. Everybody just came and helped.
Yeah.
And we get to play these big rock shows around the world where people come, and I've seen women in full headdress, like in Muslim countries, rocking the fuck out, and if I'm in any bubble, it's a bubble of unity and getting out and talking to people. So I just think it's a lot of noise, and I started writing these little observational pieces on this.
And if I understand correctly, you were thinking that this would be potentially a book or a series of columns or whatever. When did it change, and how did it change to songs?
So I had an acoustic guitar on the road with me, and there's a song, It's Not Too Late. It's the second song on the record. I think you guys are going to hear it later. Somebody's going to hear it later, right?
Yeah.
The record?
I think.
I don't know what's going on here tonight.
I don't know. If not, May 31st.
Right.
It's on the streets.
I had this idea. I wrote this 3-chord E major. I started E major, and it's, everybody's lying. I need some truth, and that's how it started. And I went to an A. Everybody's trying to push you their views, and this thing I was writing on as a column became the song. Just a 3-chord song at best, right? And I started writing these more songs, and I was thinking kind of more Mark Lanigan or Johnny Thunders acoustic, Greg Dooley. There's this particular single of his, that 4-track that I just always, it romances the shit out of my musical mind.
Right.
Anyhow, I had enough songs during this tour.
Was that Deepest Shade? Deepest Shade. Yeah.
He turned me onto that song.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
And the other one that you name checked in particular was Lanigan's track.
Yeah.
Mark Lanigan, I wrote it down here, The River Rise. Which I then went back and listened to it. It's like, oh, well, now I get it.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody here, if you're not a Mark Lanigan fan, it's fine. But if you don't know who Mark Lanigan is, go discover Mark Lanigan, and you're welcome.
Super cool.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. In listening, particularly to the Lanigan track, and listening to that track, which is very simple, very direct.
Yeah.
It's like all right there on the surface. There's not a lot of frills going on. I hear the same thing when I listen to Tenderness. When I listen to the album, I'm hearing that directness. Is that what you were keying off of?
I was keying off that originally. Then I reconnected with Shooter through my manager, Brian Klein. Yeah. And I had these songs, these ideas, this grand idea, and but to keep it super simple and musically fucking serene somehow. And Shooter and I talked on the phone. I sent him some songs. We got together. He understood it immediately. Like
Okay, let me stop you there.
Okay, go on.
Let me stop you there. So he sends you the songs. What do you hear?
Well, I mean, I loved Duff, and I kind of got wind of it through a guy named Greg Nadell, who runs Elektra, who I had been working with the Brandy thing and my record, and him and Brian were old friends, and I kind of got wind of it that way and spoke to Brian, and then I spoke to Duff, and he sent me like a Dropbox or a box. There's the different one that you use, that had all these songs that were kind of previous recorded songs and things like that. but there were some new songs in there also, and we kind of worked out these two songs. We did one day in the studio. Well, we kind of talked on the phone and aimed towards this, did one day in the studio, did these two songs. And then after that, we started hanging out at the house, at my house, and with him and acoustic. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline of all the little
I
details
don't remember
of it.
it
It's hard
either.
for me to remember because
He
it
was
kind
touring and I was touring, so we'd find times. He's got the little kids.
Yeah.
And I know that schedule. Like, I can do between 10 and 1:30. I'm gotcha, I'll be there.
yeah, except for on Tuesday, because in LA
So, yeah.
they get out at 1:30. Damn it. No, so it just kind of was like that. But what was really the meat of it was when he came over with his guitar and his laptop, and he had kind of all these ideas started on all these songs. And it was really apparent at that point in time that we were able to kind of communicate musically. That was a good way of putting it, you said earlier, but like we kind of didn't, there was not like any wasted time. It was like we'd sit down. I remember the first night we sat down, we blazed through like 6 songs and kind of worked out arrangements for them. And he still was like crafting all the lyrics, and really like in a lot of cases we would kind of figure out musical sections or verse, chorus, and like when it would fall into place, and then he would write to that, and it would be kind of like, then he'd go on the road and work on the lyrics and stuff, and then we'd come back and go in the studio, so it was kind of this, it just kind of was like jumping in a boat together, and the water just kind of took us till it was done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This guy is, a dauntingly talented multi-instrumentalist.
I'm gonna leave if you guys.
And,
wanna do
and
that.
I want, well, you see, here's one of the advantages I have. I sometimes when I talk to more than one person, I speak about the person as if they're not here.
I can pretend like
So-
he's not here. I can talk
yeah,
about him too.
So pardon me, but that's what I'm going to do. And I'm wondering for you, when you're working with a guy like this, can that be somewhat intimidating?
I actually wrote, there's a companion piece, a 3,500 word
Yeah.
companion piece that comes with like the first, whatever it is, the expanded package
Yeah.
of the
Uh-huh.
record. And there's a booklet that comes. And in that, I talk about Shooter, that exact same thing you said. He is impossibly talented, is a few steps ahead of you at all times, but he never made me feel uncomfortable or that I know what he can do. I played it with enough people, enough cats that are always ahead of me, or like, God, they're thinking about this thing in a totally different way I've never thought about. And Shooter's one of those guys, and but he never made me feel like I didn't belong in that studio as much as he belonged there.
Yeah.
And we did it as two partners doing this record. We had so many cool discussions about this ELO song or this, temporary secretary that my daughter Grace turned me on, a Paul McCartney song I never even heard. And like, Dad, check this out. But just really a bunch of strange songs, like the second verse on this thing where it turns around and does that thing, and he would finish my sentence. Extremely talented, very musical, great songwriter in his own right. One day him and I have all kinds of plans for us for like the next 30 years.
Great. We'll be
I'm
here when you get those done. When you started to hear the songs, and I'm wondering, just kind of sonically, in terms of the sound of the record, was there a touchstone for you? Was there an album, an artist, a song, something that you were thinking of that sort of fit the vibe of what you were hearing from Duff?
I think there was a lot of bands and records, like he was saying, like along the process of working on them, all this stuff would kind of start falling out of us. Like he'd play me stuff he liked, or I'd be like, "You ever heard this song?" Or we, kind of go back and forth. And I think that's what people who really care about music are people that like listen to a lot of music and are inspired by a lot of music. And obviously I kind of knew a lot of his influences from being a fan of him and of GNR and all that. Of course I knew like the Johnny Thunders, which I loved his version of that. That turned me on to Johnny Thunders solo stuff when the Spaghetti Incident, but like there was just a lot. Like for me, you know, there's parts of this record that they're like Bowie, and there's parts that are like the Kinks, and there's parts that are like Lou Reed Transformer, and there's parts that are like the Stones, and there's parts that remind me of like Steve Young, and you know, it was just kind of all over the place, but it was like the things we like about music overlap a lot. Yeah. So it was kind of just like it all kind of was part of this stew, but I could hear what I heard in the stuff, and it might be different than what he heard making it, but I think that's what made the two of us like a team going in, because we were both pulling from both of our pools of influence and making something that had a common goal. It wasn't aimed to sound like anything in particular, except for his name sounded like Duff, you know, but musically, I think it was just kind of like that. It was just kind of like we instantly, I mean, like there's a song called Falling Down on the record, and I remember my first instinct of hearing that song, which is probably completely the farthest thing, not instinct, the thing I heard that it reminded me of was Stuck on You by Failure a little bit, which I don't think that he thought for a second, but there was certain things about it that I really loved. I was like, oh, it kind of reminds me of that song, you know? And that kind of stuff is what gives my mind a roadmap in a way of like, so he might get to a section of that song and be like, well, what should we do here? Or like when we're aiming to what to do, you know, I kind of think about things
Gives
like
you
that.
a little direction.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I think we both were doing that constantly the whole time on our own, and that kind of ends up being this sound that's different than all of those things. You know
Let me ask you, Shooter mentioned Falling Down. And I know that song is sort of, paired, if you will, different sides of the coin to Wasted Heart.
Correct.
And I'm wondering, because one is very personal, one is kind of looking at the issues around opioid abuse and addiction in a much broader sense. Did those come together? Were those written, in a time frame?
No, Falling Down was written recently.
Yeah.
And I'd read a book by J.D. Vance called Hillbilly Elegy.
Yeah.
And as a guy who's been there, in addiction and alcoholism, I could really relate. And I don't look at people who are strung out as a them. Mm-hmm. It's a we. Yeah. And I'd written a song in 2008 about a very personal issue with myself, and fortunately for me, I have a wife who stood by me and pulled me out, and I blamed myself through the whole song.
Yeah.
I said you should have gone long ago, because I knew I was gonna fuck this up somehow, and it wasn't about, it was about drugs coming back into my life, and very personal song, but it was the other side. Shooter heard Wasted Heart. I'd recorded it on a loaded record that didn't really get much traction. We thought that song should have been like this thing, like this anthem. That's it song. Yeah. But it's loaded. We go out and do these little punk rock tours, and like people are like, "Fuck yeah, we love you guys," and that's it. Like no radio's like, "Who?" What the fuck? We've gone by too fast.
Yeah, right.
We played 30 nights in a row.
But there's great solace in that, that sort of effect.
Right.
Yeah.
So Shooter heard Wasted Heart. He's like, I'd be remiss to talk about Shooter's band and Jamie Douglas, the drummer, who taught me a lot about rhythm in that the sparingness of what how he plays, and Aubrey Richmond, who plays fiddle and sings amazing, and it's kind of a secret weapon, and John, the guitar player, pedal steel, sings amazingly. Yeah. Aubrey and John together, their backing vocals are like out of control. And using Shooter's band, said, I think we can use my band. And we'd done a couple tracks. Then Shooter had to go out and do some touring, and they ended at the Troubadour. He was like, would you and Susan like to come see us play at the Troubadour? I'm like, fuck yeah. And this gig was so good. And I'm pointing, we're over the balcony, we're over Jamie, right? And this is my fucking band. And they were so good. Like all of them were such stars, And but that band, they seemed to like suck into the energy of whatever song, even topic-wise. I don't know if they knew what I was singing or not. Yeah. But just the mood of the song, they really were this cushion that we could rely upon.
Yeah.
I don't know what we were talking
Yeah.
about before that, but so falling down.
Falling down and
is-
Wasted Heart.
Falling down, yeah. I mean, Wasted Heart is the personal side of that. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and so falling down is a wider view of a problem. I named a particular part of the country, but I could have named Tacoma, Washington.
Sure.
I could have named Seattle, Washington.
Sure.
I could have named Riverside or Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, one of the things that you've talked about, and you talk about it in the booklet, the liner notes, but I've seen you talk about it in other places, is almost the responsibility that artists have, in that you have a platform, and you can choose to go down a lot of roads in terms of the things that you write about, that you sing about, that you talk about, and you've made it apparent to your audience that you're going to talk about things that are important to you, issues that are important to
I
you.
usually write about them.
Yeah.
Correct. I don't know. There's this fine line in rock and roll. I mean, if you haven't been like in Guns N' Roses, if you didn't listen to the words in Paradise City, Captain America's got a broken heart. Shit's been happening for a long time, and we were a band then, young kids like, fuck the man, and we're, and it's still kind of like that, you don't want to bring, I don't want to be another voice out there, a political voice going, you should think this way. Fuck me, I'm a fucking another moron. But I do have morals, and I have experience, and I have a marriage and kids, and experience in getting sober and being really fucked up, and seeing friends of mine die, a lot of them, and seeing beauty in birth, and in my friendships with people, and reading history, and going out and talking to fucking wonderful people around the world. It's been such a ride. Like, if it ended tomorrow, I'd be sliding in my grave, sideways, going, what a fucking ride, So I don't want to be another political voice. We got enough of that shit, man. I don't even watch news at home anymore, at all. Like, at all. BBC,
Good for you.
maybe.
Good for you. But you have talked about that. It's important for you to do this for your daughters.
Yeah, my daughters. They talk about it.
Yeah.
And there's no getting around, guys. We have a song on the record called Parkland. And I was making a demo for the song with this. I wasn't even making a demo for the song. I was down in my basement, and this engineer guy came over, Dave. And he came down the stairs, and he goes, "Oh shit, have you seen it? Have you heard about Parkland? It happened again." And I have a TV down in my basement that's never been turned on. And we turned on the news, and all this shit is happening. And at that time, I had a junior in high school and a girl who was 20, I think 20 and 17 at that time. And we just sat there numb watching this. But we've seen this happen so many times. And I started playing this B flat and this D. And it was like a funeral dirge. And it was, oh shit, have you heard about Parkland? Yeah, it happened once again. Another school, another fucking heartache. And I go on to name other Columbine and Sandy Hook and Virginia Tech and the Charleston Church without saying much more than, do we have to see another mother cry? Do we have to see another school kid die? If that's the most political, you can fuck off, I guess.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's more of a funeral dirge, and it's paying honor to these kids. And my point was that I saw these Parkland kids talk after the fact, and that's more like we have a daughter who's 18, and all of her friends are like those Parkland kids. They're so together and so aware of what's going on politically, and aware that they're the next, like, the voters, and they're being really active. And I'm watching my kids, and I'm going, okay, as their dad, I got to do something, because what did you do when this was going down? My dad fought World War II when Pearl Harbor got attacked. He, like all the rest of the young men, went down to the Seattle Center and signed up. And Two of my brothers, unfortunately, were in Vietnam, and I'm in this really, really interesting, great family that we got all kinds of colors and stripes in my family, and I grew up that way.
Yeah.
And never saw, like, we were taught not to see difference in colors, or we didn't even talk, it was looked as base to talk about religion and politics and money ever, and that's all you hear now.
Right. And if I understand correctly, all musicians, you're
There's a lot of musicians.
a lot of
in my
musicians
family.
in the family.
Mhm.
You were kind of almost predestined.
I was
to
the
do
last
this in
kid
a way.
born. No, I was just made to keep time, or like, or they throw a shoe at me, keep time. Yeah, enough about me. All that shit. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry,
but hold on.
that's.
So one of the things I had the chance to spend a couple different interviews with Brandi Carlile, talking about making "By the Way, I Forgive You," and the best quote that she had about working with Shooter and Dave was, "It was like having two kids in the basement building a rocket ship." and I'm wondering, how do you describe?
Well, that's it, man. Because Shooter would do this thing, right? We'd be in the studio of an Echo Parks where we did, and there was only one. It's a small studio. There's this one lane you can, when we're not tracking, you can open the door and you can walk back and forth. And he would do this thing, and he'd start walking, and what the fuck is going on? You ever heard that Tom Waits song? What's he doing in there? What the hell's he doing in there? And that's Shooter, man.
Yeah.
What's he? And I would just sit there and not fucking distract him, not anything. Like, something's going on brilliant. And yeah, he's building a rocket in the basement, man. He's the guy in the garage in the Tom Waits song. What the hell's he doing?
He has a mail
there?
order business in Indonesia.
Yes.
My favorite Tom Waits
Totally,
thing.
yeah.
So what? Because I've read about you've said some things about your particular strengths as a producer. One of which I found fascinating was focus, being able to focus and making sure that everybody was kind of kept on task.
Right.
How did you keep?
He's very focused. In fact,
Yeah.
I feel like there was not a second wasted on any minute that we're in there. And it's like we're both that way. Like, there's nothing. Man, I've worked in some sessions, and there's a certain kind of engineer who will like do some work, and then he'll spin the chair around, and you'll be like, oh God, here it comes. And there'll be like a story, and everybody has to wait, to keep working because you don't want to be rude, or you can be an asshole and tell him to turn around or something, And Mark Rains, who deserves a lot of credit, he's a fucking fantastic engineer, did my first 4 records, worked with Dave years ago. It's his studio over there, and you have to drag a conversation out of him for the most part. Like, he just sits there,
Right. Get to work.
and is working the whole time, and he's just twisting knobs and doing his thing and doing really, really brilliant mind on him. And
I didn't realize till we went and listened to the record at the other studio, he was actually standing up. That he's super tall.
he's super tall.
What?
I had no
Mark?
idea.
I never knew, because he's always just there.
Like
That's right.
planted at the board. So I said in the open, we talked a little bit about this. You're an author. You've written columns. I'm wondering, in the process of doing that, has that changed you as a songwriter? Does it make you a different songwriter for having, kind of dealt with the discipline, certainly, of either meeting a deadline for a book or writing a weekly column?
I think the most thing that's maybe affected me lyric writing wise is reading Cormac McCarthy, or Ernest Hemingway. Just the scarcity of words and picking the right word. I've read lines of Cormac's that you read just a sentence and I've started crying. At the subject and just the economy of words he used and how he used them. And I tried, in writing my first book, I would try to aspire to that benchmark. Could I get one sentence like Cormac McCarthy? Just fucking one. And I really tried to write up to the standard of authors I read, and I know in writing the lyrics for this record especially, I used a lot of, it's a we, because the songs are about us, not me. not fucking me. It's about us. And I really wanted every word to be the exact right word. Don't rhyme fire with desire. Do not fucking do that here. You know, don't do it. You know,
the do's and don'ts.
You did so good with
I mean, we
with the-
had falling wages. OxyContin takes its place.
Yeah, see, that's
so-
fantastic.
Well, but
Sticks
you know,
in your
like
mind, man.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's heard Crazy
I
and
mean,
Baby.
you guys are both. Look, you're both writers. You know, you love reading great authors. Did you talk about books in particular?
Some, yeah. I mean, there were.
Yeah.
I had there were a lot of conversations where he would talk. He had gone to do that thing with Sean Penn, and you were talking about his book. We were talking about, like I'm a big Hunter S. Thompson fan. I read a bunch of I love Bukowski. He's I'm like the morbidness of a lot of that. A big Stephen King fan. He's much more well read than I am, and a much better writer.
we both read Bukowski.
Yeah, we both read Bukowski.
Hunter S. Thompson, yeah.
But I mean, I think there's a thing about words, though, that are really important to both of us. It's really important that how a story's told, how it's told. That's why a sequence to an album is so important, because it's the first time someone hears it. You can only do that once. And what is it going to say, and how are they? Because when somebody hears the first song, it's setting up in their mind. They're going to imagine what the rest of it sounds like before they hear it.
Right.
And so it's kind of I think a lot of that went into play. But Duff is a master at that, and with writing and when he would come in, I felt like I was trying to hold down the fort with the band and us moving through it all as he was kind of creating, writing. And he would come back and he'd show me stuff and say, what do you think about this? Is this better than this? And they're both great, and I'm like, yeah, that's great, because it was hard. I couldn't be critical because it was really great writing.
And if we look across, certainly your catalog of albums, I mean, sort of the breadth and the diversity of places you've gone musically, as I talked a little bit about it in the open, is quite remarkable. And it strikes me that there's got to be a sense that you happen, I suspect, to love experimentation
Totally.
in the studio.
Totally.
How did that translate with him in terms of that sense of experimenting
I think
with sound and structure?
I think the term experimenting is being overlaid on with me, because people expect me to be this one kind of way, and so it's caused me to swing dramatically, but I think ultimately the center of all of that is who I am, and I think in this case with this there really wasn't experimentation. The experimentation itself was the center of us together, and this is if this song's going to be this way, let's go do this. And he gets his brother in the horn section doing horns, or the Waters doing this, or Jonathan Wilson doing guitar on this. We were just chasing a sound, and there wasn't it was awesome because both of us, you could say he's a lot of the punk rock and roll stuff, and people would say, oh, this album's, I didn't expect this, and people would say the same thing about me in the other direction, but it's it was just, we had a center that we worked out of, It wasn't we purposefully went down anything to experiment.
Any particular path.
There was just no boundaries to it for us. It was just what serves all of this music the best way, and let's do that,
I have
You
to
realize this is the most we've ever, by far, talked about
Yes,
this record.
it
We're
is.
making shit up now.
That's what we like here at the Grammy Museum. Good stories.
That's right.
But I have to ask you about the track "Feel." Certainly for those of us who have in any way interacted with some of the people whom we have lost recently, that track particularly strikes me as something quite close to the bone for you.
So there's a song. I had "Feel" as when I met Shooter. I had these chords, and all I had was "Feel." When the lights go down, you are still here. All you hold dear remains. And it was coming from Scott Weiland, who I'd worked with, and really tried to help a few times intensely at one time, going to the Cascade Mountains for a month intensely, and saw that it just took him over, and we know he passed.
Yeah.
and we were on the road. I'm a huge, if anybody has their thing, my thing is Prince. And he's this magical entity to me, and a record of his, everybody has that record that quote unquote saved your life, and 1999 gave me the impetus to get out of a heroin infested Seattle of 1983 and move to LA. And so Prince, I was in Mexico City, we were playing, and Axl texted me, he's like, I'm really sorry, man, turn on the news. And because they know, like, my lifelong, and I cried, and Chris, a guy, Susan and Susan Silver were pregnant at the same time, and they had Lily and our daughter May 2 weeks apart, and we hung out with them with our babies, and not to get too heavy, but it's just real life shit. And then Chris going, and the fucking weird thing about that is that night, about 8 o'clock at night, Axl came into rehearsal and said, let's do Black Hole Sun. Let's try that song. And I got home, we rehearsed until 12:30 that night. I got home, Richard Fortus texted me, Chris is dead. And then Chester, who's a friend of ours, and friends with his family, and these are just my friends, and they're everybody's friends, aren't they? I mean, we're just such fans of theirs, and this song became, I don't name them in the song, and I gathered up the energy of those four, of the loss, the sense of loss, and it's just a song of, we still, there is a little hope, like we're gonna remember you, and we're gonna play this song for you guys tonight, and you're here, you're still here, man, and with these four in particular, and so many more before that in my fucking life. It started really young, and it's been tragic, but the celebration is I get to work with Shooter now and do something really like fucking badass and cool, and I have a marriage. I'm just like, I celebrate every fucking day. I have a marriage that's fucking fantastic and seriously badass and cool. I'm in love with my wife,
Good for you. So, last couple questions here, and a little bit off the record itself. So, Grammy nomination for. By the way, I forgive you.
We won.
Well, you won, right?
We won the Americana, though.
Yeah.
We won the Americana one.
Yeah, you won the Americana category.
Right.
What does that kind of recognition mean to you?
Well, it's weird. It's not something I thought was going to be coming anytime. But the Brandy thing, like Brandy and I became friends years ago, and our connection is so strong as artists together and as people working together that when we did this record, I knew that something special was happening. I didn't expect any of that, but for it to be through that meant something a lot to me. You know what I mean? And it kind of just solidified that relationship to some degree. But it was, it's still a trip. My 7-year-old daughter wants to open it and unbox it with her LOL toys in it. So I said, whenever it gets there, you can. When is it coming, by the way?
They'll get it to you eventually. Yeah. Don't.
Can I
don't
get it
ask,
here?
Don't ask me to.
Do you
vouch
have
for
one?
We got some on the 4th floor. You can take one as a loaner if you like.
Yeah, that's great. Just put a Post-it note or something.
Seriously, just a secret between us and the 200 people in the room.
But you were saying, about the Grammy, and he's a Grammy Award-winning producer.
Yes.
Shooter Jennings. I call him that now. Full name is. But could he bring his Grammy down here and go to the movies for free? Just get in front of the line.
Oh, that'll get you in anywhere around here.
I just bring it here, and I can get into anything.
You can wear yellow pajamas, but you got your
done. So just a couple more things. One, I do want to recognize you, Duff, in particular. I know that you've done many benefits for Music Cares, for our addiction recovery programs, raising money for people who faced that struggle, and I want to publicly acknowledge and thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, for sure.
My wife just wrote a novel that comes out in 2 weeks.
That's right.
But the proceeds from portion of the profits are going to go to Music Cares. She's fallen into the Music Cares trap too. She's like, this is the coolest thing ever, and yeah.
It's terrific organization. If you don't know about it, musiccares.org. In the past, you've talked about using the columns that you've written, as a means to find out about yourself. Good, bad, or otherwise. And I'm wondering what you've learned in the process of making this record.
Ooh, wow, you just tied two.
That's my job.
How do I tie those two together? Okay, it was really in writing my first book. In my first book, the arc of the story is supposed to be how does a kid who wants just come and play rock and roll music. Part of that dream isn't becoming a fucking alcoholic junkie. Nobody's part of their dream. I guarantee it. People I know who are using this wasn't part of their dream. So how do you get from that to that fucked up place where you're in a wet cardboard box you can't punch yourself out of, and you are expected to die by the time you're 30, and it's okay, to sobriety and lust for life again, and man, maybe I will be able to have a life, and that amazing realization that might really happen for you. That was going to be the arc of the story. Of course, in writing my stories and my remembrances, I was going to call the book All the Shit I Don't Remember, and then just interview all my friends. Like, so what did I do in Louisville that night? But in true honesty, it was a self-reflection, and we all do this. We tell ourselves these stories about ourselves, these little untruths, and they grow and they become kind of facts. And I started writing some of these out. It's like, yeah, it went down like this and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be sitting next to like one of my little girls. And it's just me and my Word document on my computer. And I just lied to myself for 4,000 fucking words. And I just like hit delete, start over. What's your side what's your side of the story, the real side of the story? You can point all these fingers out, like, what's your fucking side of the story? And that was the real awakening for me. I think it's coming into nobody's perfect, I still try to adhere to like truth and stuff, but I'm sure I've already made narratives in my head for the last 5 years, I did it all. I'm great, But in fact, that's not true, And I just try to be honest. And working with Shooter, I recognize him since I met him in 2001 as one of those honest motherfuckers who I see him being this dad and this great husband, and like that's the real deal. And he's creative and he's a genius, and he does the build the rocket ship in the basement shit, and I'm just very fortunate to be in the position I'm in right now, all of it. And that's it.
Well, we consider ourselves fortunate that you guys took the time to come down here, have a little chat. The record is called Tenderness. It's out May 31st.
It is. Yeah.
Very excited about that. More importantly, we want to hear a little music. So, ladies and gentlemen, Shooter Jennings, Duff Mckagan. Thank you, guys.
Aubrey Richmond.